calls it a, quote, dead issue, lawmakers and survivors are still pushing for the release of all the Epstein files. A bipartisan discharge petition that would force a vote to release the documents is inching closer to having all the 218 signatures it needs. This after a newly sworn-in Democratic Congressman, James Walkinshaw, won his special election in Virginia last week and signed onto the petition, bringing the total number of signatures to 217. And now Congress is preparing to get new information as the Treasury Department says it will fully cooperate and share financial records with the House Oversight probe into Epstein. Joining us now is Liz Stein. She is an Epstein survivor and an anti-trafficking advocate and educator. Also with us is MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. She's also the host of MSNBC's Can They Do That on YouTube. Liz, we want to start with you. You were really brave and went down with all the other survivors, with Representatives Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna, and you were calling for the release of all of these materials. What is it like to have reached this moment of so much public interest in full transparency and the government stonewalling, the Trump administration stonewalling release?
I think that for the survivors, we have seen this case opened up over and over and over again. And every time we think that it's being put to rest, something else happens. And so I think that our collective disgust, upset with the way that things have been handled really came to a head for all of us. And that's really what prompted us all to meet in Washington, because we felt like nobody was listening to us, but our collective voices were difficult to ignore. And we really hope that we've brought light to this issue in a way that perhaps people haven't seen it in the past.
Lisa, I know that you've had a chance to take a look at the birthday book, which was the center of attention earlier this week. There was a lot of questions and, to some extent, Republicans twisting themselves over to basically say this was not Donald Trump's signature. It doesn't look like his signature. I don't want you to make a judgment call about whether it's his signature or not, but what did you learn from being able to see the book and kind of evaluating it with a critical eye? What questions do you have after looking at that book?
I have a lot of questions about it, but let's start with the Trump of it all, because I'm not a handwriting expert and I don't want to analyze that. I think what came across to me is how very ordinary and pedestrian that letter seems in the course of reading it alongside all of the other letters from Jeffrey Epstein's intimates, his pals in Palm Beach, the scientists that he associated himself with, people in his business life, to a person, this sort of immature, creepy jokes that are made, and what is alleged to be the Trump birthday letter, are made across the entire book. You saw last week, for example, the British ambassador to the United States had his own very long submission. He is a person who has been publicly identified as gay for many years. He has a partner. And yet, in his submission, one of the things that he says is that Jeffrey would fly in and out of his various homes, and he would leave his house guests home to entertain, quote unquote, interesting guests. And there is a picture of Peter Mandelson, the former British ambassador, with what looks to be a servant in the house whose face is blacked out, and then a very, very young woman who is in a state of undress, also whose face is redacted. That shows me that irrespective of whether people participated directly in the trafficking, the culture of facilitation and neglect that surrounded Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell goes much further than the president himself and extends to lots of people you and I would consider reputable titans of industry, of academia, etc.
Liz, as a survivor, what is it like for you to, as we've received all these new revelations week after week, to hear people in powerful positions, high-profile officials say that this is all a hoax at times, to dismiss some of the physical evidence that colleagues like Lisa have had the opportunity to pore over? When you hear people speak about this case in that way, what impact does that have on you personally?
I think that's something we should all
For
really
Republicans,
remember in
the
this
current
country
trajectory
is that
raises concern.
This is a crime. It's a crime of sex trafficking, and it's being politicized in a way that it really shouldn't be. This is not a political issue. This case has been going on for 5 administrations, and we're really losing focus by turning it into something that it's not. Strip away the people in power, strip away the famous names of the people involved, and look at this for what this is. This was a sex trafficking operation. And if we had a crime, if any of us had a crime happen in our communities that had 1,000 victims, young women and girls, how could we sit and not be screaming at the top of our lungs for justice? We just wouldn't be. And so I think that what I would really ask the American public to do is to refocus on what we're looking at and to not be blinded by the politicians who are trying to make this into a political issue when it's not.
Are there things that you saw in, for example, the birthday book and the images that have come from that unlocked anything for you?
It really validated to me the culture of enabling that Epstein's world was. It really showed to the public the way that the people he surrounded himself with behaved, regarded him, and enabled him to just, this was not a joke that he was interested in young women, but a lot of the commentary in this birthday book was jovial and lighthearted about what happened. Whether the people who wrote in the birthday book were directly involved in the sex trafficking scheme or not, it's really a culture of permissiveness that is just unacceptable.
Can I ask you, Lisa, about the emails? Bloomberg had some very important emails this week that kind of reinforced the relationship between Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. How important is that trove of emails to lawmakers and others pursuing justice on behalf of victims? To some extent, she's already convicted as a sex trafficker. She's serving time in prison. Yep. But what does this new trove of emails do?
Well, first of all, we don't know whether they're new, for example, to the Department of Justice. Right. These were 18,000 emails from Jeffrey Epstein's Yahoo account. And we know that others of his emails were available to Department of Justice investigators and in civil litigation because
a bipartisan push to force the release of all Jeffrey Epstein files gained momentum as a discharge petition neared the 218 signatures required for a House vote, with newly sworn-in Democratic Representative James Walkinshaw of Virginia adding his support last week, bringing the total to 217. The effort, led by Representatives Thomas Massie, Republican Kentucky, and Ro Khanna, Democrat California, aims to bypass leadership and compel the Justice Department to disclose remaining documents related to the late sex offenders investigations. President Trump dismissed the issue as a dead issue, but survivors and lawmakers remain undeterred amid ongoing scrutiny of the Trump administration's handling of the files. The Treasury Department announced it would fully cooperate with the House Oversight Committee's probe, pledging to share financial records, including suspicious activity reports on Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Committee Chair James Comer, Republican Kentucky, stated the move would follow Epstein's money trail to ensure transparency for survivors and the public. This follows the release of over 34,000 pages from the Justice Department and Epstein's estate, including the controversial birthday book compiled by Maxwell for Epstein's 50th birthday in 2003. Epstein survivor and anti-trafficking advocate Liz Stein, who met Maxwell at age 21 and endured years of abuse, joined survivors in a Capitol Hill meeting with lawmakers, including Representatives Marcy Kaptur, Democrat Ohio, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia. Stein described the frustration of repeated openings and closings of the case, saying survivors' collective disgust prompted their advocacy. Nobody was listening to us, but our collective voices were difficult to ignore, she noted, hoping to illuminate the issue anew. MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, who examined the birthday book, highlighted its ordinary and pedestrian, yet immature, creepy tone across entries from Epstein's Palm Beach associates, scientists, and business contacts. She avoided authenticating a sexually suggestive note allegedly signed by Trump, featuring a drawing of a woman's body and phrases like, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey," noting Republicans' denials that it matched his signature. The White House called it fake news, but Rubin pointed to a broader culture of facilitation and neglect. One entry from former British Ambassador Peter Mandelson referenced Epstein leaving interesting guests at his homes, accompanied by a redacted photo of a young woman in undress, suggesting elite complicity beyond direct participation. Stein emphasized the case's non-political nature, spanning 5 administrations and affecting over 1,000 victims in a sex trafficking operation. "Strip away the famous names and look at this for what it is," she urged, decrying politicization that blinds the public to the need for justice. The birthday book validated for her the culture of enabling around Epstein, with jovial commentary on his interest in young women reflecting unacceptable permissiveness. Rubin addressed newly leaked Bloomberg emails from Epstein's Yahoo account, totaling 18,000 messages, which show Maxwell's deep involvement in his 2008 Florida plea deal, advising on charges like lewd and lascivious conduct versus procuring minors for prostitution, contradicting her claims during a Trump DOJ interview with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche of a diminished role. The emails, exchanged over 200 times in 6 months, prove Maxwell lied repeatedly, including about managing Epstein's affairs pre-prison. "She has a tendency to say self-serving things," Rubin said, underscoring their value in exposing perjury despite Maxwell's conviction and 20-year sentence. Stein reflected on her trauma, advising her younger self and others, "Tell someone, and if that person doesn't listen, tell someone else." She praised the strength in speaking truth amid shame. As the petition inches toward success and financial probes advance, survivors demand focus on accountability, vowing their voice